Yo, good day, gents, and welcome to another episode of Father's Fire. My name is Jody Sedrick, as you know, and every week we get together to explore the joys, the challenges, the triumphs, the sorrows, and yes, the fun of being a dad. And hopefully, you guys have had a fantastic weekend with Mother's Day just a little bit ago, and you took some time to honor that special lady, whether it's your mom or your wife, your girlfriend, all the baby mamas maybe you have. Just, I just really hope you took some time and recognize that they're such a critical part of your kids' life and also of your life. And so I hope you had some good memories with that. So today I wanted to, as you guys know, I spend a lot of time on social media, whether it's TikTok or YouTube, and I'm always searching for men who have been striving to be good fathers, right? And I'm looking for men who are have open hearts, that are sharing stories that enable us to become better husbands, to become better fathers, and ultimately to become better men. And I think a lot of times, we don't have the conversations that need to be had. And so I've been following a gentleman. His name is Andy Bohart. He has a TikTok channel called Dad's GrieveToo, TOO. And I love the name of your TikTok handle and just the message that you're bringing. So welcome to the show, Andy. It's good to have you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Appreciate it.
Yeah, it's we don't often talk about grief.
No.
Um, and so first of all, I appreciate you being willing to have the conversation with me because grief is a lonely journey some days.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember my cousin, Larry Dale Jr., passed away when he was 26.
Mm.
Um, and I remember, and he kind of died tragically. He had a drug overdose, and they cracked his chest open. They massaged his heart for 3 hours, trying to revive him, and ultimately he didn't make it. And I remember, just watching my aunt in particular really struggle with working through the loss of her son and my cousin,
Yeah.
right? And my
Yeah.
my cousin Vicky. And there just are never the right words to say.
Right.
There just aren't the right words to say. And so eh, I think one of the things that I've come to realize and that you've shared a lot on your TikTok is sometimes the greatest thing you can do is to just be present.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's absolutely right. Because what a lot of people, because we don't talk about grief at all in our culture. And what I found through my personal experience was people want to say something, right? People love you. They're there. They showed up at the wake or the funeral or whatever you're doing to celebrate the life of your child or your loved one, whatever. And they try so hard to say something, and words are really meaningless. I mean, to put it very strongly, words don't bring back their loved one. Um, so what I found is the people that were there, they didn't say a word, they just gave me a hug. Um, those folks were the ones that really helped the most. Because what happens, and I'm sure some of your viewers have felt this or seen it in their own lives, is everybody shows up to the funeral. Everybody's there. Everybody's, having a great time and they're celebrating with you or they're mourning with you or both. And then suddenly, they're gone and you never hear from them again. And in my experience, I needed folks, after the funeral and the wake. Because honestly, you don't really remember much of the wake. You don't really remember what's going on because it's just so soon. You're so numb. The pain is so blinding emotionally that you find out how lonely you really are couple days, week, maybe a month after the funeral. And that's really when I needed people the most. So If you've got people that are going through grief, check in on them, because they need you more than you can possibly imagine. And if they're like me, they're not going to come out and say, "Hey, I'm really hurting, I'm really
Yeah.
struggling, why don't you check in on me?" That's not going to happen. They're going to stay, especially if they're men, they're going to isolate, they're going to self-medicate, and they're going to divert, their feelings. And that's, I mean, classic men, male grieving. That's very classic. Other, women do it all as well, obviously. But, our sisters on this grief journey are, I think, better prepared in general than men are, just because they know how to talk, they know how to emote
Mm.
openly. They know how to share very horrible, deep, grief topics easier than men do. I am a leader of a men's group called Helping Parents Heal. Actually, it's Helping Fathers Heal. It's part of Helping Parents Heal. And I talk to guys every week, and the new dads are shocked at how vulnerable we are and how open we are, and how we just tell our stories, and we're there supporting other men going through it. And that shock is like, wow, I've never shared any of these things or like this with other men before. That's very common. It's very common.
I love that because I think men haven't been given a safe space
Right.
to express their emotions, right? I mean, as a
Right.
young boy, we're always taught, buck it up. It didn't hurt that bad,
Right.
just
Right.
man
What's the
up and
worst thing a
push
man
through it.
yeah, what's the worst thing a man can be? It's weak. And when we're
Weak.
crying, we perceive we're being weak. No, it's just
Yeah.
grief, right? It's You're
Yeah.
supposed to cry, right? You
Yeah.
lost
And,
your
and I
kid, or
think
you lost somebody close to you.
yeah, and I think that's important because and you brought up, women are better equipped to express their emotions and share. And I believe it goes back to when we were kids. They were taught how to
Mhm.
embrace their emotions. If they got hurt, people rallied around and put their arms and how does it feel? And oh, you poor sweetheart, and all that stuff. And we haven't been taught how to work through pain and loss and very real emotions. And so I think a lot of men are left ill-equipped to wrestle with very real emotions that are human emotions. They're
Right.
not emotions, they're not men's emotions, they're just human emotions.
Yeah.
And I love that you've created a safe space for men to talk about it because a lot of us, we just go into isolation.
Right.
We go off
Right.
in ourselves, we self medicate, we,
Right.
go in the garage, work on the car, and we never express the pain and the
Right.
loss, the very
Right.
real loss that we feel.
Yeah. Well, and we also see that on our relationships as well, because our wives or our partners, or any woman in our life, they want to talk about it, and it's, however painful it is, they need to share that emotion. And when we're quiet and withdrawn and we're in the garage, and trust me, that's exactly what I did. um that makes them feel even more isolated from the one person who's supposed to be standing beside them. And I'm not disparaging anyone, because that's exactly what I did. And my wife, who she was a widow very young. So she lost her first husband, her high school sweetheart, when she was in her 20s. And
Wow.
so, yeah. So she really taught me everything I know about how men and women grieve differently. And she helped me. She told me very bluntly, she said, "It is okay for you to feel. It is okay for you to cry. It is okay for you to be weak in front of me." Because, I mean, I'm a prior service Marine. I've held all the macho jobs. I've had the titles and all that great stuff. But when you lose a child, you are the most vulnerable you will ever be. You are torn down to lower than low. And her giving me the okay to grieve and to be quote unquote weak, that it was amazing for me, and it set my grief on a completely different trajectory than a lot of my brothers that go through this. I've seen their struggles, and a lot of it is because they think they have to be tough in front of their wife. In my opinion, no, you don't. You need to be grieving alongside her and sharing as much as you possibly can. And I think that effort goes a long way in helping relationships, because I don't even know what the statistic is, but so many relationships end after a child passes. And I think it's partially due to we just grieve so differently. And
Yeah.
women need us, our women need us, or our partners need us more than I think maybe any other time. But okay, that's just my opinion.
No, and I agree with that, right? And there's real power in walking through trial and sorrow together.
Yeah.
And as you point out, I think a lot of relationships struggle because we as men have a tendency to isolate. And as you point out, the women want to talk about it. And somewhere in the middle, we need to give each other permission to
Mhm.
grieve. You
Yeah.
need time to go and be alone, but you also need to come back and go,
Yeah.
all right, sweetheart, this is what I was wrestling with. How have
Yeah.
you gotten through it? Right. And what I found is that times of turbulence can either separate you or sear your hearts together,
Yep.
and you both get to choose.
Yeah.
And it's tough because I think one of the challenges to grieving, and you talk about this on your TikTok, is there is no timeline, right? It's like I may go through my grieving process faster than my
Mhm.
wife or you,
Mhm.
right? And I shouldn't have the expectation that you're on the same timeline as I am,
Right.
because you're wrestling with different feelings and different experiences. And, it's just important that we give each other grace to work through our pain and our sorrow
Yeah.
and our
Yeah.
loss and our anger. Right? I
Yeah.
think a lot of times we don't allow men to be angry that I lost
Right.
someone.
Right.
It's like
And
that's
anger
part of
is
the
one of
grief
those.
process.
Yeah, it's one of the major steps, right? I heard some author said the intensity of rage or anger is very close to that intensity of initial grief, right? It's where that searing pain, that searing anger, those are very similar experiences. No, you're absolutely right.
So
And yeah, go ahead, go ahead.
go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say the timeline thing is really important to understand. Um, Grief is a ridiculously singular emotion. Uh, I mean, my wife's grief and my grief totally different, right? My grief and Josh's brother's grief totally different, and it should be, right? Because in reality, we're grieving different relationships. I am grieving the
Mhm.
loss of my son. My sons are grieving the loss of their brother. And the mom is grieving the loss of her child, that she carried, brought to this earth physically. So I think it's a huge mistake for people to think, oh, well, because I'm grieving this person, they're grieving similarly. It's not. It's going to be completely different. The timelines are going to be different. And the other thing that I want to mention for folks, if they haven't gone through intense grief is not linear. Um,
Mm.
you will feel moderately okay one day, and the next day you won't be able to get out of bed. And what happens is you'll be going throughout your day. Let's say you're 6 months or a year down the line, after you lost your loved one, and you'll hear a song on the radio and it will destroy you. And you'll be in bed for the next couple days, either physically or emotionally. And that really surprised me. I'm like, well, I should be feeling better. And a very dear friend of mine said, no, that's not how this works, right? It's not like you're serving time and after so many days you'll be better. And that's the one thing I've noticed on TikTok is a lot of the comments I get, people are like, oh, I lost my son, 4 months ago. Why aren't I feeling better? And I'd like to say, you're not going to feel better for a long time. I
A
mean, I'm going
long
to be blunt.
time.
It's going to take a long time, and you don't want to rush it, in my opinion. Everything I say is just my opinion. I'm not an expert. I'm just some dad, right? But you have people that want to quote unquote get better quickly. Don't feel the feelings, go through it. Make sure that you are addressing the obvious things, like you lost your loved one. That's obvious. But have you grieved who you were then? Because that person's gone,
Mm,
right? The person I was 44 months ago doesn't exist anymore. I'm different, right? There's a bitter sweetness that will be with me the rest of my life, no matter how quote unquote healed I am. And that's another misnomer. When I say healed, I don't mean, oh, I'm jumping for joy and, I'm perfect. That's not what I mean. It means that I'm better than I was 44 months ago, right? I can breathe, I can work, I can interact with my family and my other children where 44 months ago I couldn't, right? So that's
yeah.
what I mean by healing, because that seemed to get quite a response on TikTok. I'm never going to heal. Well, no, I'm not either, but I can carry it better now than I could then.
Yeah. The other thing that struck me when I was scrolling through your TikTok is you had, I correct me if I'm wrong, but you were at the hospital or someplace, and a caregiver
Yeah.
just happened to ask you what your son's name is.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
And that's, I
and
mean,
I
thanks for
I
bringing it.
share that because I have a related experience, but I want you to share yours first. So
Okay. Yeah, I was just going in for routine physical blood work, vitals, the whole 9 yards, and, this wonderful caregiver, nurse, and I wish I knew her name. I just, I wasn't paying attention like that. I was just, going through the flow. And, we were just chatting in between, the blood draw, I think, is what we were chatting the most. And she asked me about my family, and so whenever I refer to my family, I always include my son that passed. um and I always refer to him in the present tense, like, my son's name is Josh. And she didn't know that. She doesn't know anything about me. And, when I was telling her about my family and I'd mentioned that Josh had passed, she said, very not in very perfect conversation, like she didn't even think about it. She said, "What's his name?" And for a person, at least for me, that was amazing, that she was so connected and she understood grief so well that she knew, to me, if she said the word, "What was his name?" If you think about the subtle difference between that, when you say something like, "What was your child's name?" you're saying that child no longer exists, is no longer, like, there's no longer that connection. And, my son, Josh, will be my son until the day I die, right? And I will always refer to him just like I refer to my other children. And for me, it's incredibly healing because, I don't think my mind can really attach to the idea that, this loving soul that was with me for 20 years is suddenly not there, right? I
yeah,
just don't believe that. So, um, her saying, "What is his name?" validated that he is still my son, whether he's alive or in heaven. And he will always be my son until we're reunited. So that is such a huge thing. And, and when I posted that post, I was like, yeah, this isn't going to resonate. I'm the only weirdo that thinks like this. And it went crazy, all sorts of comments on it.
Yeah, I love that because my dad passed away like I think it's been 6 years ago now,
Wow.
and I don't know how to explain it. Right, I just
Mm.
he's still very active in my life. I don't know how,
Yeah,
and I have a very strong just conviction that
mhm,
families are they continue, right? They
yep,
don't end. I mean, yes, death is a door that
sure,
separates us for a time, but I don't know how to express it. I mean,
yeah,
my dad is very active in my life. I don't understand how that all works, but
right,
it's not like he was my dad. He is my dad, and he still
yep,
moves. And
yep,
it's interesting because I think about how different people mourn, and I've shared this on the podcast before, but I'll share it with you because you haven't heard it. My dad, before he passed away, was he had 80 feet of oxygen hose connected to him, and
mm,
he would
yeah,
shuffle through the house. And my dad was an incredible water skier when he was younger and healthy.
yeah,
And he's like, look, guys, he goes, when I pass away, which we're counting down the days, he'd always say, I'm
sure.
dying in 3 days. Right. Yeah, dad, whatever. Right. And so he always made light of it. But so we were really prepared emotionally and spiritually for his passing. Right. And
Sure.
so when, when, um, when we had the funeral, he got all of the military honors.
Yeah,
They had the gun salute, and that was so powerful, especially
mm,
seeing the flag draped on his coffin. Right.
yeah,
And my brother's in his dress blues as a Marine. His best friend, who
mm,
was a Marine, was in his blues. And it was
yeah,
just such a powerful time. Right. And so we had that moment where we were feeling the loss and we're going through that part of the service, and then we're like,
yeah,
after we go to the cemetery, all right, let's go to the lake because dad wanted us to have a party and celebrate, so we had
right,
this big barbecue.
yeah,
And then I made some mask of my
mm,
dad. So I had a mask and my brother had a mask. So my brother's driving the boat with my dad's face on it. And then I'm
no,
slalom skiing behind and I'm holding the mask, and we do this big old rooster tailed flyby as with the water
love
skiing
it,
on everybody waiting on the beach, right? And afterwards people came up to us like, we can't believe you did that, right? Why
yeah,
aren't you sad? I'm like, well, yeah, we are sad, but
yeah,
dad wanted us to celebrate. And what better tribute could we give him than
yeah,
doing something that he loved as a family? And we actually still have it. We made a flat dad. And basically it's a
yeah,
cardboard, photo of my dad with his arms all stretched up, and he was
I
sitting
love
by
it,
the lake, right? A full-size picture of my dad, right? And I think that helped. I think it helped everybody go, you know
yeah,
what? This is a part of life. Yes,
yeah,
we're feeling sad and we're feeling lost,
yeah,
but there's also time to celebrate and laugh. And I
right,
think a lot of times, as you pointed out, many times you don't know what to say,
mm-mm,
but just being there is
yeah,
power,
right,
right? and
yeah,
and that was what was fun for us, was like everybody
yeah,
was there, they were laughing, they were sharing stories about my
yeah,
dad. In
huge,
fact,
that's
my
huge,
dad's best friend Dan Coley, who's the Marine, he's like, yeah, I'm glad your dad had the health issues that he had, because he would have been a Marine if they would have accepted him. And your
yeah,
dad would have been lying in the fields
yeah,
of Vietnam somewhere, because he would have been a very powerful,
yeah,
dedicated Marine. I go, yeah, that was my dad, right?
yeah, yeah. No, and that's the one macho thing that I like about warrior culture. There's a lot I like about warrior culture, but telling stories of our warriors, right? Telling stories of my son, your dad, our loved ones is a way of keeping them alive, right? I think it was the Vikings that, after a battle, they would, drink and tell stories of the battle and, the quote unquote glorious death of of their brothers in arms, brothers and sisters in arms. And that's not quite what I'm talking about, but it is,
No, yeah.
telling the stories and wearing the mask and water skiing, and it's amazing how much I learned about my son from the stories his friends told me. And I knew he was a great kid, a great man. He would be very upset if I called him a kid. But he was way better than I thought he was, right? And I'm always careful. I don't want to make him a saint because he's a human being just like we all are. But man, he would befriend the kid that no one would befriend in school, right? He would have lunch with the new kid, and he felt such empathy for everyone, right? And I knew it a little bit, but I didn't know how real he was. Our family, after he passed, and this is the sad part, after he passed, we're like, wow, we knew Josh, but we didn't really know him. We didn't know his impact. Um,
Yeah.
and I think that's the value of those stories because, you knew your dad a certain way, but his buddies knew him a different way. And when you hear those stories, you're able to build a complete picture of this man that was your dad, but he was a person before you were, right? And he had,
Yeah.
the way he was, and I think that, I'm Irish ancestry, so the idea of a wake was just natural. That's just what we do, and drinking beers and saying toasts and telling stories. I just find that hugely healing now, 44 months later. In the middle of it, I was a wreck and didn't really recognize what was going on. But afterwards, that's going as one of the saddest memories of my life, but it was also one of the greatest memories. And maybe people who have gone through it know what I'm talking about, or they think I'm
Yeah.
absolutely
No.
insane. One of the two.
Well, dude, we could keep going, but I want to be respectful of your time, and part
Thank
of
you.
it's kind of interesting that you say that telling stories keeps our loved ones alive in our hearts and the lives of others, and in a very real way, your TikTok is keeping your son Josh alive,
Yeah,
right? It
yeah,
enables you to talk about your love for him, how
yeah,
much you miss him, how much sorrow you've gone through.
yeah,
And I just love, I really, really appreciate that you're sharing your journey of grief. Right. And one of the things that I did it was I went back. I'm like, all right, when did he start this? Right. And I went back, to
So the
2022, and
very
in
first one,
2022,
right?
yeah, you were like, you know what, this has been a 3-year journey, right? And I'm like, it just really hit me, how profound and how long loss can take for us to work through it.
Yeah,
Notice I didn't say heal, I said
yeah,
work through it, right?
yeah,
And because you become somebody new when you've
yeah,
experienced loss.
yeah,
There's parts of you that are revealed that you're like, oh man, I didn't so much like that part of me, but
yeah,
there's aspects of your character of tenderness and empathy and character, that I think are that there's light shed on them through these experiences, and it teaches us how to truly love and put our
yeah,
arms around each other
yeah.
and walk with each other. Looking back, and I know you talk about this, but what are some things that you think are helpful for men going
Mhm.
through the loss of a loved one, especially a kid, because that is a different level of
Yeah.
loss.
I wouldn't wish it on anyone. Wouldn't wish it on anyone. I would say for men, particularly, buddy up. Don't do it alone, right? I am a loner by nature. I can be by myself for weeks and I'm fine. But that's not helpful when you're hurting that much. Um, a men's group or a buddy or a guy you just have a beer with can make all the difference in the world. I'm going to just say that. The other thing that I've found helpful for myself and other dads is you have to try to stay active, whatever active means for you. If it's going for a walk, walking the dog, or it's hiking, running, whatever, right? The reason why that's so helpful is it helps get rid of, that pain, the physical. And I think it is the same for women. I don't know. I'm only talking from my perspective. Getting out in nature, in whatever way you like to do it. Water skiing is a perfect example. I really found that very helpful over the long term. You're not going to feel like doing it at all. You're going to want to stay inside more than likely. The other thing is learn to share your story. Learn to share the story of your child or your loved one, whomever it is. Because when you are sharing your grief, you get to hear it. You get to experience it. But the person on the other end learns. They learn from your experience. I am a big proponent of, there are people that are losing children right now that are where I was 44 months ago. And they need people to come alongside them in whatever way, be it on TikTok or at a church or a synagogue or wherever, some, community center, wherever the grief group is. We need to help. We need to turn around and help the folks that are going through the nightmare that we've gone through, because we're further down the trail than they are. And at some point, they're going to help somebody. And I think just those types of things, when you're ready, make a huge difference on how your grief journey progresses. So those are just kind of some ideas.
Well, I appreciate that. And I love the phrase "your grief journey," because it's not it's not I shed a bunch of tears, I punched a wall, and I'm done. It's it comes and goes in waves, and you do well
Yep.
for a season, and something happens,
Yep.
and it brings you back, and that's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
I think that's the big thing that I want people to fit you men to recognize, is that it's okay to be sad. It's okay to be
Yep.
angry. It's
Yep.
okay to be happy and celebrate, right? It's just
Yep.
enjoy embrace, not enjoy.
Yep.
Embrace
Right.
the journey
Right.
of loss, and embrace the journey of grief.
Yeah.
Embrace the journey of overcoming
Yeah.
and becoming through the
Yeah.
process.
Yeah. Yeah. Because you
So,
can't hide
man,
from it. You can't hide from it. It'll find you eventually.
and I think a lot of us try to hide from it, right? And then all
I
of a
know I
sudden,
did. I know I tried. It doesn't work.
it doesn't work. So, well, thank you so much for taking the time
You
to
got it,
talk
brother.
about your son Josh. I mean, what a great tribute to him, to have you sharing your story to help other men. Because I think, like you said, you're farther down the trail, and
Yeah.
while your journey isn't an exact blueprint, it sheds
Right.
light on a
Right.
path that others can emulate and
Right.
tailor to their own journey,
Mhm.
because
Yeah.
we just need guideposts, and the guideposts will serve to help us move through our own journey.
Yeah. Very well
So,
said. Beautiful. Thank
well,
you. I'd
thank you
love to
so
do it
much.
again if you want me back.
Yeah, that would be great. So, guys, go connect with Andy Bohart. He's on
Yeah.
TikTok. It's Dad's Grieve 2 TOO. He's got a
Actually, that's
lot
my
of.
old account. That's my old
Oh, that's
account.
your
It's
old
Dad's
one?
Grieve 2 with the number.
What the number? Oh, maybe I'm going between both of them, but
You might be.
and your wife has one too. Yeah, your
She
wife
does.
has a
Yep.
new one too. What's hers?
Yeah. Hers is Life After Grief.
No, I love that. So,
Yeah.
so guys, go connect with Andy and his beautiful wife. And if you need someone to talk to and you
Yeah.
don't have somebody in your corner, shoot me a DM. I will gladly pick up the phone and talk to you. I don't care if it's 10 minutes, an hour, because I know what it's like to feel alone. I know what it's like to feel in a dark place. And sometimes you just need someone to hear you, to walk
Yeah.
with you, to be a friend. And I can tell you, there are men who have made a huge impact on my life because not necessarily of what they said, but because they were there in a dark moment. And dude, it's a journey. So, guys, go connect with Andy Bohart. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. And we're gonna check you guys same time, same bat channel, just next week, right here on Father's Fire. See ya.